As promised, today I'm going to show you a little more of this room. We're going to get a different angle so you can see me from a separate thing other than this right here with these lights in the same way. I'll show you where the lights are, show you where the panels are. We'll walk around the studio a little bit. So here we go. All right, I'm about to take that camera off the stand. I switched over to this lav mic over here. I don't know if you can peek that. So it's going to sound different, but let's keep it moving. All right, so I'm going to give you a sense of this room from angles you've never seen before. So the lighting going on behind me, in case you're curious what's going on, I got these two ADJ floor things that, like, you know, they're these bars, these mega bars. Now, I just have two of them. They're facing opposite directions, but one of them lights up the guitar section over here. And, you know, I got a few guitars on the wall, basses over there. And, you know, one of those is just like a jazz bass. That's the one I play most of the time. But these are my go-tos, the Les Paul and the G&L. So this guitar here is my first guitar ever. It's a Samick. I don't know if you're familiar with Samick guitars, but it's got a Floyd Rose on it, and I kind of took the middle pickup out and replaced it with this Jackson pickup in the middle. It's kind of just, I mean, it improved the sound like crazy when I did that. But it's got this, that's not a drawing, that's actually a raised, let me see if I could focus this thing. Bear with me here on the focus jam. There we go. So this is raised. I don't know if you could tell that this is actually not a drawn. I mean, it's drawn clearly, but it's actually lifted up. If you feel it, you'll be able to tell that this is actually raised off the surface. So I was in love with that guitar, but that, like, this is my first guitar, and at the time it cost $400, and I remember being like, I need that, and it was an amazing purchase because I never wanted to put it down, and pretty cool, sick guitar. But that's very similar to what I wound up getting later, which is this Jackson Charvel in the back. That's Charvel. Like, I mean, ultimately that was just a more playable version of that guitar. But this is like an original Ibanez that's all beat to crap. And it got a baseball bat for a neck is what it has, but that's an Ibanez. And it's, at this point, I mean, it's just a piece of trash, but it's also an old school guitar. The switches don't work. The frets feel like tin foil. It's not really playable, but, you know, at one time I was like, oh, this is perfect when I need that tin foil sound. But anyway, yeah, that's, you know, a logo jam, and this is just like this knockoff Lotus Strat that I just keep, you know, beat around. It was actually a buddy of mine's guitar, and he wound up giving it to me years ago, back when I was in high school with him. So that's what that is. Belonged to my friend Stefan. We have these basses here. This is an Ibanez bass that came in a starter pack. And this thing right here is the jazz bass I play all the time. This jazz bass in the front it's Richie's Custom Shop in New York City. Basically, he built that. And that's a kind of a legend in the game of East Village guitar builders slash techs. I mean, the guy's a phenomenal. All the work he ever did on all my guitars made them all sound amazing. So anyway, this right here is this light that I always have behind me, because it's important when you look at the desk from over here. It's important to see, to get yourself backlit. So if you're curious what I have going on, I've got, you know, a light, these two lights that kind of left and right front of me, and then this one on my right side. The Barefoot monitors, the NS10 monitors. It's so funny. I've mentioned patch bays before, but I've never really showed you guys what the patch bay is about. This is a soup. Now, it's funny. I watched that Barry Johns dude's video when he was talking about patch bays, and he's like, you know, if you know what you're doing with a patch bay, you wind up, you know, you don't have to have wires all over the front. And all I kept thinking to myself is like, that's true for about a week. About a month if you're lucky, and then as soon as you get other things and you have to attach more and more things to the patch bay. What happens is it doesn't stay the way you originally intended to plug everything in. And when you've got a room, in here, I've got my live room. So like when I'm sitting at this desk, okay, and at the moment I've got my laptop kind of propped up in front of stuff, but we'll get back to the desk in a second. When I'm sitting at this desk, I turn this way and I got the drum set in the live room. And I don't know if you could see it, or I'm trying to focus on it, but there's a panel on the wall back there. I don't know if you kind of see it. There's this black panel like right next to the floor tom. You see that panel? That's a 24 input panel. So I basically can send 24 channels into this room, and they wind up in the patch bay, okay? Now, all my gear in here winds up in the patch bay, but what I was saying is every time you get new things, you're not going to go into the back of this patch bay and unplug a ton of stuff and replug a ton of stuff and keep trying to make it where things are normaled, and like you're just not going to do it. It's too much of a pain. And honestly, that's the biggest reason why those switchcraft patch bays where you can change the way things are normaled and stuff on the front with a switch, like those TT bays, those are great for that reason, because this, you have to literally pull everything out of the back and the front in order to take these things out and then change the cards around to make it normaled, to be able to prevent using wires all over the place. So nobody's going to do that. Who's going to do that? That's what I mean. Like it was all in good shape for about a month or 2 months until I got other pieces of gear, had to connect other things. And then once you do that, you're all over the place. So you want to know the plumbing setup? What a mess. But I never pretended to be a neat freak. So that's that's just not me. I'm not a neat freak. Anyway, this is this is the Allen and Heath console I've mentioned several times because it's where I started. It's the first thing that I ever actually picked up for. It wasn't that much. It was a few $100s. I think it was like $400 or $500, and it's 16 mic pre's with EQs and 4 groups. So the 16 gets to 4 groups, and then you got to your 2 masters. But the way it works is all these plugs are actually plugged in. It's hard to tell because of the lighting isn't the greatest, but they're not plugged in all the way, because that's the trick. If you don't have direct outs, you have only inserts, you'd basically plug in the plug 3/4 of the way, and then you have a direct out using your insert points. So by doing that, I have 16 mic pre's that I could, if I want to record 24 things at once or something, combine these 16 with other things. That's a 5432s, I think they are. It's like old school Neve 6 channels, and 5442, 5432, I think. But anyway, it's basically, limited on the EQ front. It's not, it's not an SSL, it's not a 1073, but they sound great. They really sound great. So these are my go-tos when I'm trying to make things sound good. I'm plugging everything through there. I'm plugging everything through the BAE 1073. That's a 1073 that a buddy of mine built into one of these ammo containers. Pretty sick. And then the 1073 over here, this BAE 1073 with the EQ on it. And that's actually, it's the limited edition black version, but that is a 1073 BAE, and it's just in black instead of navy blue. Because it is. So, most people get that in the same Neve color, and I am not most people, so I just didn't. But I also bought it used, and I have a feeling when I bought it used, I got a particularly good price on it because most people didn't know what it was. It doesn't look like the other 1073s, and I never plan on selling it, so I was like, score. But anyway, so we got a B80 mothership, looking kind of bare. There's enough room to put a taco dip in the right side and, some queso in the left or whatever. But, you can put your popcorn in there or something. But the bottom line is, I don't do as much summing now as I used to. But on the left side, this is the BAD 4M. Let's get some focus happening. BAD 4M. and you know it has the transformer button on it, and this is only populated with 4 M's and 2 BDA 4 M's. So I got 4 inputs, you know, Burl converter inputs, and I got 8 output. So you know, 4 on each card. And one of these cards, I mean, talk about super geeky, nerdy, technical stuff, but if you get it standard, it's the 1414, which means the op amp is like 14, the BAPA 14, and the 14. And, you know, they're a little more colored, but so I have that on the first card, but the second card, I actually have the 1114 because the 11 is known to be a little more transparent, and that's usually what I use to monitor through. So that's what I have, you know, in the mothership at the moment. And then everybody knows, let me just pull this down. We got the 5060 I've mentioned before, talk about it all the time. A very clutch piece. If you use it for like at the moment, all I'm really using it for is to drive one channel, because I have recently developed an aversion to summing. I am now very much against summing at the moment. You know, I was summing for so long, and now I'm using the Latte feeling like I don't need to sum, but I still use one channel of this thing, and I use it as a monitor controller, and I use it for the transport. So, I mean, the fact that it has the transport controls on it is pretty clutch if you use it for that, and the monitor controller factor makes it where, even though I'm not summing, it's still pretty clutch for me. So, you know, and don't forget about the clarity. You need a clarity jam. Everybody needs one of those as far as I'm concerned, because it's just invaluable to have a constant meter going with a phase scope and everything else you need just always on your desk so you can stare at it, so you don't have to open a plugin up in order to get things to happen for you. Something else I don't usually mention that much, but what an amazing purchase. This UC1 is like probably the best purchase I've made in a long time, and it's not that much money comparative to like what you could spend on gear, but does that improve my workflow? 100%. It makes EQing things, compressing things, gating things more accessible, quicker, and more importantly, like more tactile. So I'm not looking at the screen as much. I don't usually know what anything's set at. I just might have the muscle memory developed in the hands to know where things are on there. And it's just so easy. It's actually, I mean, you don't have to move your arms and your shoulders to be able to like EQ things. Like on a console, you're moving around, whereas this thing, you just click the track you want and then boom, you're off to the races. Valuable. Like, I don't know, I can't express it enough, because only if you use SSL stuff on everything like I do would it make sense. But that, and then this, you know, a little fader balance thing. A lot of people talked about for a while how this doesn't follow the tracks, and that's the downside to it. But I think they fixed that. But for me, it doesn't matter anyway, because I would usually just feed the buses into this. So if I dump all my buses to like the last 8 tracks, then I have all my balance control here that I would need for everything. Like, for example, all lead vocals on the first fader, all backups on the second, all guitars rhythm on the third, all guitars lead on the fourth, bass on the fifth, drums on the sixth, and then whatever auxiliary stuff I have on the last 2. Now, that's something that I just, hands-on approach to balance isn't bad, but a lot of times I'll just click through stuff and just use this for automation. But either way, you know, it helps to get a balance up quick when you go tactile. Now, MBP, you know, Neve Master Bus Processor, and then the SSL Fusion, and then there's a Dangerous Convert AD+. So sometimes I just drive, like what I used to do when I summed all the time was I would drive the Fusion into the AD+ to be able to really just jam that thing as if it was a limiter, because it sort of is a limiter on there built in with the clip guard button on. But since I have had the Latte, I would be lying if I said I used that thing even once since then. I tried it and I was like, nah, Latte sounds better, so I just went back to that. It's close. It's not bad. I would say it sounds good, but it doesn't sound as good as the Latte to me. So, you know, who knows? But bottom line, I haven't used it since I got the Latte. It's just something about the Latte that feels like nothing is going on at all. Like, it's just so transparent. Somebody I heard talk about it sounds like a piece of wire, like nothing in the way of the sound at all. And I agree with that 100%. It sounds as natural as it could possibly be to send it through the latte. And that's just an amazing thing. Once you've heard it, it's hard to kind of go back. But I had a lot of fun on that thing for a long time because you can hit it as hard as you want and you don't really have any weird things happening when you do, you know, I mean, within reason, of course. But I'm a guy who has who's kind of schizophrenic when it comes to converters. I used to sometimes use that dangerous, sometimes use the Burl converters because they all sound different. So especially when you're hitting them hard. I mean, the Burl, the BAD4M, I couldn't hit as hard as I could hit this dangerous. So they both have different sounds. So it depends on what you're going for. If you're just going for super loud and you don't want to hear artifacts, the dangerous is probably better. If you're going for that Burl sound, the Burl's better. If you're going for no sound at all, as just the most pristine, not changing of the sound, then the latte is killer. So anyway, moving on. Down here, I've mentioned before, it's kind of, this Mohawk Audio 1176, it has these two different switches on it. I don't know if you can see this. See that switch says Carnhill Edcore? That switch is banging because you get to switch between two different transformer sounds that sound completely different. So in addition to the fact that you can go all buttons in and do all the good stuff with 1176 that you may want, I keep it generally on that Edcore setting for my kind of always, microphone when I'm doing videos and everything, and but I'll flip between them. They're both awesome. That sound is awesome. So this is just a power supply thing, that Allen Heath thing for the board above it, and that right there, the Yamaha, what number is the P2200? Was it? Yeah, the P2200 powers my NS10s. So that's what that is. Now the NS10s over here. I have to say, I hate mixing in headphones, and I love mixing on NS10s, and I don't know what it is. I love it, but they don't have all that low-end information, so the Barefoots kind of provide the low end that I'm missing on the NS10s, and I may have talked about this before, but you see that, the Barefoot, what do you call it, that little switch on the table, that controller thing? That's and it's got a couple settings on it. One of them's cube. I leave it on cube a lot because it gives me that Oratone vibe, but, when I set it to flat, you hear a lot of bass. When you set it to the hi-fi mode, you get a ton more bass. So it's cool. I dig it. Back there, you see the tripod. That's usually where the camera sits when I'm doing the videos. Now, like I said, these 3 light points in front of me, combined with that one behind me, and then the colored on the floor, give me the setup you guys have seen many times. You got the Marshall. Always got to have the JCM 2000. I recommend, too, if you can, put your cabinet in another room and your head in the room you're in. That way you can tweak it and hear what the speakers are doing, kind of separate from what the amp is doing. It's not really relevant what the amp's doing. It's relevant to a point, but I typically just care what it sounds like through the speakers, because I'll tweak the amp and I want it to sound good through the speakers. If I'm standing in the room with the amp, it doesn't really matter what that sounds like. So the Apogees I've talked about before, these are old school, man. AD16X and DA16X. Old school 16 ins and 16 outs, and they have a sound. For better or worse, they have a sound. The Hearback Technologies, that's for, monitoring, so that everybody has their own mixing control of everything, anybody who's tracking. Trinov ST2 Pro. I've talked about this before. What a game changer, because even though I have the Trinov, though, and I mentioned this in yesterday's video, look at the treatment. Look at what we got going here. Let me back it up as much as I can. All right, so to the right of me, in other words, where that NS10 is, to the right of it, you got this. This is a 4-inch deep panel that I built myself. I had help, like I said, but if you look behind it, it's on that kind of L bracket thing. And this is just a frame with Owens Corning 703, and it's wrapped in the front and back. So it's all around and then stapled to the wood frame with a staple gun. The Owens Corning's inside, and the Guilford of Maine wraps around it. And then I hung it on the L bracket on each side. Now, air gap. That's what I want to show you here. Look at air gap. There's an air gap back there that's approximately 4 inches. So 4-inch panel, 4-inch air gap. It's actually probably closer to 3. It's not more than 4, the air gap. So anyway, we got that. The corners are completely taken out of the room. Behind that, I have triangle pieces that go to the floor, all the way to the ceiling. There's this weird bar thing, you know, that beam that goes across the, it's like, what LVL, they call that, I think. Bottom line, you got that thing with this, you know, there's actually like a wood frame at the top and a wood frame at the bottom, and then I just filled it with these triangle pieces of Owens Corning cut, you know, into these, just filling up the whole thing. Now, what I learned later is that that actually doesn't help. It would be better to have an air gap behind those. And this is one of those weird things that, in my opinion, has been perpetrated throughout the industry for so long that so many people get that backwards. But, you know, I think it would work better, knowing what I know now, if there was an air gap behind that thing rather than fill the whole corner with a triangle. I think that's just one of those things, and that was written in the book I read, and if I'm not like that, you know, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of people do that, but it's better to actually have an air gap so the sound pressure has a place to go. Without it, it doesn't work as well. Now, the ceiling cloud above me, same thing. See, every single thing I built here is all done the same way. You know, the framing you use can be different. I saw Colt build it, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was Glenn Fricker. Somebody was building it with like sheet metal for the frame. I thought that was interesting, but for me, I used wood, and I mean, you could use any kind of wood, but you know, furring strips I've seen people use, and you know, you could use anything, literally. If I'm not mistaken, I use the same kind of wood that I used to frame this. Like, I feel like we just got more of it. You know, I cannot remember, but I'm going to see if I have any pictures of when we were building these. But bottom line is, some kind of wood frames this thing, because this isn't actually not wood at all. Where is the wood's at the top, and the wood, so this is, just so we're on the same page here, let me just show you what I'm talking about. So there's wood here, and it's this thin, like, furring strip right here. See that? That's the wood. There's no wood here, but there's another furring strip in the back. So there's actually, around this entire thing, to the top, all the way down, like, it's only about that thick. It's this little furring strip that basically outlines the panel. That's only about that thick. From here to here. It's really not big. It goes front and back, and that thing creates a pocket to put your, you know, Owens Corning in, or rock wool or whatever, and then you know, both sides of it with the fabric. But as I mentioned before, you know, if you could wrap it in something, it's healthier, because the Owens Corning is exposed essentially, but it is covered in a fabric, but it's not airtight by any means. So anyway, all the corners are taken out. The left side, where this NS10 next to, you have those things right there. I have my barefoots pushed all the way back against, as far as they'll go, like on the floor. Basically, those things are just pushed into the corners. And it kicks some bass, but that's my biggest problem, is the bass is not a direct sound. I mean, or direct isn't the right word. It's not focused. The bass is really just sort of splatty. And because it's splatty, I'm never really sure what the bass is doing until I check in headphones, I check in the car, then I know what the bass is doing. But by listening and mixing enough in here, I sort of came up with my own way to make it work. But I'm not happy with it. Like, it's not as good as it could be. Bottom line, it's just not. And I'm being totally frank about that. I wish it was, but it's not. That's a line from the other room that feeds down into the back of this patch bay with everything in it. I've got 6 patch points in the front here, just wired in so I could plug, if I need, 6 things directly into that. At the bottom, 6 different mic lines. And what didn't I talk about? Oh, yeah, so you got the old school 192s I only use for digital conversion. Just, you know, it gives me an AES port on each of them, which is valuable because the Latte goes AES. So, you know, digital to digital, I found there's no signal loss, there's no signal degradation. Like, digital to digital is all good. So even though these things are old school as hell, it doesn't really matter because I'm only using them for the digital side of them. Also, these Apogees get connected to those Digi 192s digitally. So we're not using the analog to digital conversion on these things at all, on either one. And because of that, it doesn't matter that they're old. Because it's just ones and zeros becoming ones, like to ones and zeros. There's no, and the converters don't matter because it's not converting anything because it's digital. So anyway, what else do we got? And these connect to this through ADAT cables. So that's how I get 16, ins, 16 outs. They all go into those 192s. And then the AES in and out gets me the latte. And right here, JCF audio latte. So that blue light on that latte thing is like a freaking bedtime light, man. I mean, that'll light up your hallway, dude. So the latte is a complicated piece. I could do a whole video on the latte, but then we got the warm audio Pultec below it. Yeah, over here we got my guitar pedal board. Everybody loves the guitar pedal board. This is what I gigged with for years, and it was a collection of pedals. I actually had several more pedals, and a few of those got swiped from me when I had some work done on the house. So that's always fun. But it is what it is. But anyway, we got a pedal board here, tuner, octave pedal, a couple distortion pedals that are cheap from Amazon, and then Deja Vibe full tone, Coral Flange full tone. We got a digital reverb by Boss, the digital delay reverb, the flanger, and the Meteore pedal, which is a sick, amazing reverb pedal that does this cool, like, amazing, what is it, like a catastrophic thing where you hold a button down and it just keeps like a feedback loop kind of happening. And then there's another one of those Amazon reverb pedal for cheap deals. But yeah, I find pedals to be awesome, but I don't usually use them for mixing. I know a lot of people use like one of those ecstasy things like by Radial. I find any sound I can get on there, I can also get it in the box using something. So I don't find the need to come out and then into them and then back in. It's just not something I do. My mic that I always use is like a U47 clone that is a particularly great clone. It's called the CM6. I wonder if I could sort of clear that up. CM6 by Stellar, I think it's Stellar Labs, or maybe just called Stellar, but it is a U47 clone that they do not make anymore, and I have two of them, and it is a phenomenal sounding mic. And they're just, I use it on so many things. And there's the power supply for it right there. But yeah, so let's jump in the other room. There's one of those hear back things sitting over there. It's got like the 6 different channels that you can mix stuff with. This is an old school reel-to-reel that I do not usually use, but I've played with the idea of playing with it. And I might start doing something with this thing. But that's a Vietnam purchase that my dad bought that when he was in Vietnam. He was in the Navy, and he basically brought that back, and I still have it because it means something. So we got that thing. This is like just the section between the sections. I've talked about how important air gaps are. Well, if you're trying to isolate one room from another, put a giant air gap in between, use it for storage. What a difference it will make to being quiet in this room. If you're trying to be quiet in your control room and you got your live room out here, having this storage section in the middle with a couple different snare drums, the pedal board case, couple keyboards, a bunch of cables, it's critical. It helps. So, drum set. That's a drum set I've had that for a long time. It's it's an early 80s kit, if I'm not mistaken. It's like the Pearl Custom Z export, import, I don't know, one of them. Pearl Custom Z. Try to zoom, focus on that thing. Yeah. Pearl Custom Z, all maple shell, made in Japan. So this thing it's an amazing drum kit. It sounds great. So basically, panels all throughout. I just want to kind of give you a rundown on some panels. So I've got these panels, You know, another corner. Every time you see that, it's entirely filled with those corner traps. These two gobos that I've talked about before. Now, the gobo jams are interesting because they're on wheels. You see the casters that I built here? So again, I had help. I'm not the most mechanical person of all time. I just sort of designed them, and I was like, can somebody build these? And I had help building all these panels, and the people who did it were thorough. So, I mean, these things, they roll around. They're not what I would call the most sturdy things. Like if I wanted to put these in the car and take them somewhere, I'm not so sure they'd survive the trip, but luckily I never do that. So we got diffusers here that I built with some buddies of mine, me and two friends, camped out on the couch and just, you know, I cut all these pieces ahead of time and then we glued them all in together, following they're not just random. We followed the pattern of what it should be. And that was a couple hours well spent. More panels on the wall, the same thing. These all have 4-inch air gap, and then you got another corner gone. Now this, behind this wall is, let me close this door on us so you can see, we got this window jam. Now that's the vocal booth, all right? Now what I want you to see, I'm gonna back up a little here. So that's the vocal booth. You see more ceiling clouds, giant ceiling clouds. That's an 8x4. Now, right here, another ceiling cloud. Now, the reason this exists here and it's on that angle like that, besides from the LVL being in the way, but right here was where my old mixing desk used to be. And I used to have this pole in my life, destroying my entire life. And this is a big reason why I wanted to move into the other room, because this thing was just always in the way. I had this right, and I know I could get rid of it by putting a steel LVL in or a whole bunch of nonsense, and not sort of, I don't want to compromise the whole integrity of the structure to be able to do that. But anyway, so right here, I had my desk looking into this room, and I had the drum set set up right across the, you know, from this, so I could see into there. But I decided to switch rooms, and I have to say, you know, that's the anchoring theme of this whole thing. What I want to like explain is, if you don't try things, you never know what's good or bad, and you must be willing to fail every step of the way. Like I learned so much from building this and making it where it's, you know, not ideal by doing it in, like, in other words, having this here would be a non-starter for me in the future. On any time I'd build something, I'd figure out a way to not incorporate that into the whole thing and kind of deal with that first. Instead, I thought I'll just, you know, have that thing to my back left and put the desk in front and it'll be all good. Terrible idea. But mixing in this room, because it's wider, like it's a wider room. I'm gonna try to stand in the back corner so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So like this room is a wider room than the other one. It is suited for a live room better because people have so much room when you're trying to come in here and have a bunch of people playing at one time. But that's not what I do most of the time. What I do most of the time is mix. I'm mostly mixing, sometimes mastering, and I'm mixing and mastering remotely most of the time. When there's people in here and I'm recording things, it's great to have a room. Yes, it is. But since I'm mixing most of the time, this is a better room to be in most of the time. So before, when I was over here, I just noticed the sound was better because the bass wasn't trying to get down a narrow corridor in a way. It felt like it was more, everything sounded a little more clear in a way. And, you know, just something I realized. Anyway, this is the vocal booth. Vocal booth, there's another here back thing. Now, when you're wiring a place like this, just keep it in mind. So every room has a panel so that the panel all gets back to the patch bay. But also, I don't know if you can see it next to this pole, but there's a Ethernet cable that is running along with the pole. And that Ethernet cable, like right here, for example, that Ethernet cable feeds into like these talkbacks. That gives you the ability to plug in, you know, everybody gets their own mixer in every room. Now, when it comes to amps, you know, and the other, right behind me, you probably saw the Marshall already. You got that Marshall 4x12, or is it a 4x10? I don't know, whichever one it is. I'm a guitarist and still, I can't remember what that is. It's the standard whatever, the 4x10, obviously. But over here, we got PV Delta Blues, which was a fantastic sounding amp. It just kind of wound up, doing it deuced the bed pretty bad because it's PCB board or whatever in there, and when those things go bad, they're almost impossible to fix. So I had a guy trying to fix it for a while, and then we just gave up. But I had him turn this thing into a cabinet, so the speaker was still working fine. The only thing that doesn't work is the electronics, and the whole, the fact that it's a combo didn't work anymore. So now I can plug any head I want into there, and I've got another speaker cabinet that weighs a ton, but sounds very good. Then you got the Fender. This is a 70s Fender Twin Reverb, and it is pretty amazing. It sounds great, and I had that thing serviced not long ago. Sounds really good, and that's the one I usually have mic'd up for most clean tones because it sounds, I mean, it's probably one of my favorite amp tones there is, especially when you crank it. They're so loud, though, it's really hard to crank without, closing it into a room, and, that's why I keep it in here. That Marshall is another one of these where I don't use it as what it is. I use it strictly as a cabinet. I had a guy wire the same thing like I did with the other one. I'll show you what I had him do here. So this cable, that cable that I just pulled out of the back of this thing is what I plug into a head, and then I plug into the head, and then this serves as a cabinet only. And the reason I had to make this into a cabinet is because the speaker in there sounds half decent, and it's light. Whereas this thing it's not balsa wood or anything, but it is heavy, like bricks. This thing is not, it's light. It feels like, lifting up a little foam micer, no big deal. So that thing it's good to carry around if you're gigging because it's just one good speaker, sounds good, plug any head into it. This is a 16 ohm speaker in there. And is it 16 or 8? I don't know. It could be 8. Let me see. I always check before I do anything just to make sure. What is it? 8 ohm. It's an 8 ohm deal. That is my first amp ever. That's a Line 6 Flex Tone Duo, I think. It's like their tube emulation of, it's not a tube amp, but it's got a tube preamp in it, I think. 100 watts. And that thing has been beat up, and it's the first amp I like really, the first real amp that wasn't just a little practice amp. This thing I got for a steal. It was a company going out of business, a local music store, and they had this like, another one of those kind of modeling amps, this Johnson, and every time I bring that in anywhere, someone yells out, "That's a big Johnson." But so we got this Johnson with this cabinet that just sort of is its combo, and that thing is kind of cool to have this like narrow, you could just come with that, or you can come with the double if you want to kind of stereo up your amp. It's interesting, but I got it for almost nothing, so that's why that exists. Now again, panels. This room is super dead. Panels, old Furman pedal board, panels, just panels everywhere. So, I'm a panel guy, and you can see they're all the same. They're all, because I just bought the same stuff, and it's all framed the same way. It's all the same 2x, this is all the same. There's your border right there. It's like a furring strip. It's about that big. It goes around the entire thing on both front and back. But yeah, some of these panels held up better than others. This one's kind of bowing out a little bit on the side. You can see that's actually where the Owens Corning kind of is sticking through, because that one must have got dropped or something. But anyway, it's that one. These are holding up great. The ceiling ones, they just look pristine. But the others, some of them look good, some of them don't. But anybody could build those things. So I just recommend you wrap it in a thin layer of plastic or do something to prevent those materials from being exposed to the air if you move them around and touch them and have AC blowing on them and things like that. So this, I hope, gives you a sense of where I'm at in terms of space. And, the whole anchoring theme, let me just also show you this real quick. The Rhodes, Fender Rhodes. This is one of those, there's actually a couple of these that were built by a different person than built the rest. And when I opened it up to like tune it and check it out, that's right, you can kind of tune these things. When we opened it up, I just remember thinking, Like there was a name or two on there. We looked it up and we're like, wow, that's the good. Those are the ones that are supposed to be good. So I'm stoked about that. The reason it's on a table and doesn't have the pedal connected to it, where the sustain pedal, is because someone before me broke the the pole that sticks in there so you can have its own stand. It's broken off in the middle, so I need to like saw a basic, like a to be able to. I need to saw some kind of divots into it so that I can twist it out of there with some kind of metal pry bar or a giant flathead or something. But until I do that, it sits on this table. And to be honest with you, it still sounds great without the sustain pedal. And then this is this old school Roland synthesizer, which has, the thing I love about this thing is all these knobs. It has these tactile functions for, a lot of things like accent and the shuffle and the octave and the tempo. It's just so many, like you could basically control attack and release and a lot of different things with these knobs. I thought was cool. But I've had this forever. It experienced a bit of some shell shock right there. I think it was under something that had, fallen down and cracked it. And now it has, its own issues, but it works. This is just key. I mean, you can't use those keys really unless you get creative, but that thing still does what it does. So yeah, and then over here next to the drums, we always have the talkback plugged in, and there's that panel I was telling you about. This feeds into the other room, and it's 24 ins, and that's really what I use it for. So yeah, that gives you so this is the spot, all right? And that orange head is amazing. It's like the tiny terror, the dual terror rather, it's because it's got both the clean and the dirty. And this just gives you a sense of what we're working with over here, all right? Now, the anchoring theme I wanted to kind of get across, also, just pop into the bathroom. Got a little bathroom. Bathroom, toilet, mini fridge, so you never have to leave the studio section to do anything. Now, don't be afraid to go ahead, build something, because it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad, or you'll always need to change something, and it will always be something that you will correct the next time you build something. The thing that everybody wants is to get it right the first time. Everyone always wants, get it right the first time. Make it where you don't have to do things twice, where like you'll always have to do things twice, no matter what. You have to be willing to fail. Not only do you have to be willing to fail, you have to be willing to fail big. All right, let me turn this around so you can see me a little bit here. I didn't know how to light anything until I did. I didn't know how to build any of this stuff until I tried. I didn't know what would work or not until I messed it up, and now I know no matter what I did, the amount of coverage that I don't have is a big reason why I have too much uncontrolled low end, or rather lack of low end in the room. I know now that the corner traps, filling them up is not a good idea because it doesn't actually help without an air gap behind them. I had to learn so much by doing and being willing to fail. And the bottom line is the worst thing you could do is try to get everything right, and as a result, hold off doing what you want to do. That's the absolute worst thing you could do, to try to plan and prepare and prepare and prepare forever and never do. It's sometime you have to do, no matter what it is. And I think so many people hold back the doing, whatever it is, whether it's mixing a song or building a room or building one acoustic panel. Everyone holds back until they think they're ready. And they never think they're ready because we're never truly ready. I never know, is this going to work or not when it comes to any of the stuff I've ever done. And I think everyone's like that. I'm not alone. You're not ever going to be sure it's going to work. It reminds me of, who does it remind me of? A guy who invented the light bulb, Thomas Edison. He said something like he failed 1,000 times before he actually succeeded and got what he wanted to happen in a light bulb. And the same thing with anybody. Everybody knows it just has to work once, and they can fail all these times. If it works once, it works. And that's really it. Just keep being willing to fail. That's really the thing. And then at least you'll get further down the road. Because I guarantee you, everyone who's ever built a studio, they didn't get it right on their first time. They just didn't. So you might as well start somewhere and realize you're going to make mistakes. And that way, when you do, you won't be so upset because you'll know it's bound to happen. But by doing, I'm actually going to get further down the road. So I hope that helped. I hope you dug the tour. A little bit of a different style today, but if you dug it, throw something in the comments, hit the like button. I really appreciate it. Tons more stuff to come. Any questions, let me know. If you want me to get specific about anything I talked about, let me know. And if you got other ideas for videos, I'd love to hear them. All right? Keep in mind, you guys got this. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. I'll talk to you guys soon. You guys got this. Take it easy.